All right, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Pod Podcast. This is the world's greatest podcast, and we're talking with Liz Kang from Mamame. This is really cool. This is real innovation in the snack category. I think much needed, like a lot of the brands that we've had. This is really unique. I got a chance to try these at a customer presentation last month. It's a novel application that really has never been done before from what I've seen. And I think it would be really interesting to a lot of consumers out there. So welcome, Liz. Welcome to the Podcast. We're happy to have you. Let's hear about your origin story and what got you into this mess.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. We're huge fans of the podcast. To tell you a little bit more about Mama May, it's a very interesting origin story, I would say. I will start with kind of the fact that I never expected to be an entrepreneur, and I never expected to be in the food and beverage industry. So my career was very different. I was in media. So I was on the ad sales side of CNN for a couple of years, and then I was on the editorial side of CNN, and I was a producer and making content, both for commercial partnerships, but very different vein. And in 2020, my mom actually was kind of the first to conceptualize, Mama May and the brand. And at the time, she had been living in Jakarta, and that's where I grew up. So my entire family, we moved around all of our childhood. I have a younger brother, my dad and my mom. And I spent 12 years of my childhood in Jakarta, Indonesia, which is the home of tempeh. Tempeh is really the national food of Indonesia. Like it is a superfood. It's one of those kind of lesser tapped into categories in, I guess, the rest of the world because it's not very transportable. But it's long been standing as an alternate plant-based protein source in Southeast Asia and Indonesia, especially. So my parents at the time, during COVID, were living in Indonesia. They've been there for like 22, 23 years. And my mom, who was a stay-at-home mom for 27 years, decided after my brother went off to college that she had a little bit of empty nest syndrome. And at the time, I think she was considering kind of something in food, especially because she was so good at it. She's just a natural chef, a natural, like intuitive person when it comes to grocery shopping. And she really wanted to do something with Indonesia. And she was looking at products that she could export out into the world, and kind of like, explore opportunities to, bring more awareness and attention to these like beautiful resources and products that Indonesia had. And tempeh chips were kind of like an emerging category. For historically, like tempeh, you see it in like a burger or you see it in a stir fry, and there are very different applications of it. For those who are not aware, tempeh is like a cousin of tofu, except the whole bean is retained in the fermentation process, and typically it uses soy. Because it's very accessible, high in protein, etc. So my mom kind of was exploring different options in Indonesia. On the streets, there are like little vendors that sell like soy tempeh chips in little like plastic bags. And I think when she was first looking into it in 2020, there were some tempeh chip categories that were like coming up in the grocery aisle. And she looked to exporting that, but she ran into a couple of problems, which was that they were all soy, and she really kind of knew the kind of public conception of like soy and how it was changing. It's one of the top 8 allergens. It's also not like very good for like women and hormones, and like it's really hard to source like non-GMO soybeans in Indonesia. And the second was that they were all cooked in palm oil. And she really like wanted to create a product that could be eaten by any person anywhere, of all ages. And so to kind of do that, we landed on this like recipe, well, she did, of non-GMO black-eyed peas and coconut oil. So she conceptualized it in 2020. We started doing weekly Zoom calls with the family. I was still in my job. I was living in Hong Kong. My brother was in college in Evanston, Illinois. And we would just kind of get together and discuss what to call it. Like, I still remember when we were like like, what's the name gonna be? And like it really became a product in 2021, 2022. My brother designed the packaging. And I came up with the name. I wrote the copy on the back. It was really a family effort. Um, and we sent our first container for export from Indonesia to Korea in 2022, late 2022. And we launched on shelves in 2023, March, which is last year. I
Yeah.
can't even believe that. And at the time when she launched, she decided to sign us up to go to FoodX, which is a really big food show in Japan. And I took some days off of work to go help her. And I went to kind of, just carry the boxes and, set up the booth and talk to a couple people because she's also English isn't her first language. So I just went with the mindset like, yeah, my mom's like spreading her wings and like really flying out here. Let me go and be there to support her. And that was kind of like a kismet moment, that show, especially because I think that was when we really realized what this could be,
Yeah.
rather than just kind of seeing where it goes. So when we showed up, we were in this tiny little corner booth in a hall that like no one went to. And because we had no idea what we were doing, everything
That's
was
where all
DIY.
the coolest stuff is at the show.
Yeah, totally. I think they knew. So we were in this like corner booth. We did everything DIY. And it was like a kismet moment. I say this because it was post-COVID. It was one of the first big international shows post-COVID. And what I heard from people who were there was that typically buyers from the US, buyers from Europe don't really show up to these shows because this is an Asia interest show. But it was post-COVID and everyone was itching to get out, all these buyers, to travel. And the top two shows were they want to go to Japan and they want to go to Paris. And so the Japan show was, filled with these buyers that we otherwise would not have met. So the top two senior most buyers from Costco were there, from the Bay Area and Los Angeles. And they showed up to our booth and they were like, this is amazing. We love it and we want it now. And, we were like, we launched last week. Like we are doing this by hand right now. We can hardly do a container. Um, and they were like, we'll wait and like we'll like, keep in touch and see how that goes. And then we turned around from that and then like the show was phenomenal. We got a lot of like great attention. And bear in mind that my mom has no food industry experience. She's never been an entrepreneur, and neither have I. I don't have this background. I didn't know anything about the retail landscape and like how distribution works, how importing works. I didn't even know what a pallet was. Like, this was like a
Yeah.
real clean slate.
Yeah.
My brain was like a rock. It was just like smooth. There was like nothing to really go off of.
Yeah.
But I think that
You
was also
uncarved block. You were the uncarved
exactly.
block.
Yeah, and I think that was to our benefit because we were learning as we go.
Yeah.
So the show ends. I go back to Hong Kong to do my job. Within a week, my dad gets hit with a cancer diagnosis. And it was like at the time, because my mom was new to this, my dad had been an entrepreneur before. So he was kind of helping her out and he was retired. And then with this diagnosis, he had to, go to Korea, which is where we're from originally, to get treatment and, kind of, rest. And my mom went into this like real panic mode because she was seeing the demand and like the potential of the company and the direction it could go. And at the same time, my dad was no longer there to support her. And then she kind of came to me and she was like, do you want to do this full time? And for me, I am so down to help my family because we have a really close relationship. Like we really love each other and support each other. Um, and I thought to myself, like, when else am I going to have the chance to, be in the back seat of the car that my mom is driving into, global domination. And
Yep.
so I put in my resignation and I started full-time June last year, which coincided with the Summer Fancy Food Show. And so we were in New York, like, as soon as I left my job, 1 week in
Yeah.
Hong Kong, next week in New York, and we were selected as like the on-trend product. And we hadn't submitted anything. We also had no idea what we were doing. And then so once we were there, like the attention that we got was really phenomenal, but we had no distribution, we had no importer. So all the questions they were asking, like, oh, are you set up with UNFI? Are you set up with KeHE? Like, who do you work with? Like, what stores are you in? Every answer was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So that was June of last year. And fast forward to now, we just launched stateside. So we're in SoCal, um, and also nationwide with Sprouts and their innovation program. So it's been a very, very exciting, like 15 months, I would say.
Yeah, well, and it's not it's the journey that you have everyone's journey is unique in terms of the the family dynamic and the origin, but the path that you're taking going from your first show stateside, getting interest from the right types of retailers and getting on shelf, that's a very common path. And I think that what a lot of brands they don't know what to expect next, right? It's like you're on shelf, you're in this really cool retailer at Sprouts. Now what, right? Like you're there's a series of key stepping stone inflection points along your journey, right? And this is one of them. And it's the beginning, actually. Like for as long as you've been at it already for a few years, this is the beginning of the journey. Everything prior to this was preamble,
Yeah.
was prologue, and now we're getting to the main event, right? And it's going to be really interesting for you because everyone's journey here is different. But now people are going to experience your product in a different way than they ever have before. It's in some ways the brick and mortar stores, but especially ones on an innovation program like you're on Sprouts, they're the ultimate influencers because your product is going to be right in front of the consumer, face to face in those 430 stores, and they're going to make the decision. And it's all of that work that you've done up until this point, the packaging design, the recipe design, engineering the right price point, the right Nutrifacts, right? It all boils down to that 2-second decision that the customer is going to make. Like, should I buy this right now? Uh, but it's actually it's a beautiful thing to watch when that happens, though.
And I mean, doing the demos the last few weeks, I've been in the Sprout stores, and it was like the first time doing this in the US. And the miles that we have come from Indonesia, and I myself flew in from Singapore, which was a 15-hour flight. Like that journey, like was full of reflection on the fact that like, at the beginning we didn't have any of this. We didn't have like any kind of knowledge, any kind of network, and just through like the right partnerships, the right friendships, like we've gotten here. And it's so, so amazing to see what the customers respond with. Um, it's interesting because I would say like only 80%, 70 to 80% of people are even familiar with the concept of tempeh. And they'll try it, and our success rate has been really high. Like the customers really kind of resonate with the healthy and nutritious and the taste profile. So the intersection of that, I think, is maybe rare to find with while ticking all of the dietary restrictions and like the boxes that they might have when they're in the grocery stores. So it's been fascinating.
So, what's the what does the crystal ball say?
Ooh.
Where do you want to be 2 years from now? You're still at the beginning of this journey, but what are the aspirations and goals for where the brand would be? Not you don't need to go into specifics, but what do you want the brand to look and feel like in 24 months?
That's a really wonderful question, and it's also the question that keeps me up at night every day. Um, I think when I think about goals, goals are ever changing, right? As you go through different phases, they might grow, they might like, change in form. But I think for us, we've always had like our main few goals that we started out with, and they're big goals, but small steps, I think. And the first is it's been my mom. So my mom, just to give you some context, she's a 54-year-old Korean lady. And she's like 5 foot tall. She's super mighty, and she's like a mad scientist when it comes to, tempeh making. And she's really, really like OCD and ADHD at the same time when it comes to like getting the product right. So she's a real quality person. And her singular dream has been to be on the shelves of Whole Foods in the US. And that's just because like when I was in college, I was at Northwestern, I lived above a Whole Foods. Like she would like come
Yep.
by and then she would be like, this is the greatest grocery store in the world. And that's like 10 years ago almost. And like she would go to the Bryant Park location in New York and just like stand in the halls, in the aisles, like for hours, just like exploring, reading up on all of the labels, like, looking at the price point and
Yeah.
just like analyzing. And it was her dream. And she said, like, the moment we land, she'll cry. And we're in the Whole Foods in the UK. So we just
Okay.
recently launched there in September.
I worked in the Whole Foods in the UK for 2 years, so
Oh
I
my
know
gosh,
very
the
well.
team there
So
is
I
incredible. They're
opened those
so
stores.
wonderful.
Yeah.
No wonder. So yeah, like that was a journey as well. We haven't been to see it. We haven't had the chance yet, but small steps, like I said. So that was her first goal. But I think, as I said, it's ever evolving. Like the retailers that we're like trying to work with and like have been exploring opportunities with, and that's been ever changing. And I think that's what's so amazing about the process as well. Like, is that there's always someone who is looking for a product like ours. And once we partner up with them, the synergy is incredible.
Yeah.
So that's our first goal. I think the second goal is really to be like it's the awareness element of to be a category maker. When we started, it was really like the snack aisle, the salty snack aisle was divided into potato chips, popcorn, tortilla chips, and like maybe pretzels. And the fifth category would be kind of the gluten-free or like healthy alternative to those existing four categories. So like a CNA, or like a lesser evil. So they would substitute out elements of the existing category to create, I guess, a better for you snack. With tempeh chips, it's really its own thing. The struggle that we've had is that people don't really know where to put us in the grocery aisle. Are we in salty snacks? Are we in functional snacks? Like, do we go with the chickpeas or do we go with tortilla chips?
Yeah.
Um, I've been saying that whatever is dippable is a chip, and these chips are very dippable. And
Yeah.
so it's been kind of a trial and error. We're trying to figure out where we perform the best as well. But
That's how
it's,
I would sell them. I would sell them as a chip. I would just say it's a chip, just like any
yeah,
chip. It just so happens to be a really awesome tempeh chip. So, like, I
exactly.
think
Yeah,
that's,
that's that's
so,
kind of the
mm,
what we're hoping for.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great story so far. We'll have to have you back on in a couple of years after
Thank you
you've
so much.
achieved those goals, and then we'll talk about the next steps from there. So,
Yeah.
but it's been good to hear from you. We're excited. We're rooting for you. We're, keep demoing,
Yeah.
and we'll be watching how it goes and helping you along the way. So,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much, Peter. We love you guys. We love Pod.